I found this Pokemon cartridge which has been chewed by a dog. Obviously, this thing has seen better days. I bought this for about £15, and a Pokemon cartridge in good condition on eBay seems to sell for anywhere between about £25 and £30, and obviously this one is not in good condition, but it was actually sold by someone who seems to sell lots of games and retro stuff, and they've snipped off the corners because there's very flat edges here, and they said that the actual cartridge itself works. However, if you look in this little corner right here, the actual motherboard itself is chipped. And so in this video, we're gonna fix that. And I'm also going to be making this look a hell of a lot better because this poor thing does not deserve to be in this condition. And also, I'm not taking any risks with my precious Pokemon Blue save. I'm going to be fixing this board situation because having a chip down in the corner is one thing, and we don't know what other damage might be on the inside of this until we open it up. To do this, I have bought a Hamtaro game. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be taking off the chip that is inside here that makes this cartridge Pokemon, and I'm going to be putting it into this, a Hamtaro cartridge. Don't worry, I'm not going to be keeping it in this shell. What we just need is the motherboard. This did not cost me very much at all, and if I'd actually been patient and ordered it from Japan in a bulk of other stuff, it would have cost next to nothing. So there we have it. We are inside the Hamtaro cartridge. So we're going to set that to the side for just 1 minute, and let's go ahead and take apart the Pokemon Blue cartridge as well, and we can take a look at the condition of the motherboard inside. Let's get this camera a bit closer. So this here is the main damage that is on the circuit board of the Pokemon cartridge. The rest of it all seems to be in pretty good condition, and thankfully where the dog has actually bitten, it might have punctured the battery if they had just gripped a tiny bit tighter, but thankfully that didn't actually get all the way through. So the rest of the cartridge all seems to be in pretty good condition. It's a fairly hollow cartridge, you know, there's a decent enough gap that a dog can chew. They've probably tested that at some stage. But yeah, this cartridge seems to be in not too bad condition. But yeah, what we actually are really interested in is this big chip right here. This is what we're going to be removing, and then we're going to be putting it onto this cartridge, which as you can see is virtually unused, and I wonder why. I'm sorry, Hamtaro community, but yeah, we're going to be taking this chip off here. So the seller had actually replaced the battery. As I said, they were, you know, an actual reseller of retro stuff. So they replaced the battery, which was very kind. But because we're going to be fitting it into here, I have actually ordered some new batteries to replace the one that's in here. I could have just taken this one off, but I'm going to actually be refitting the Hamtaro cartridge chip into this, so at some point we're going to need a new battery, so I've ordered a couple of those. There's a minor difference between these two cartridges. The Hamtaro cartridge actually has a like a real-time clock thing in it, like a sort of a clock crystal. I'm not exactly sure what it is, so there's a slight difference in the boards with these surface mount components here and this. But since I don't want to just completely kill this Hamtaro cartridge, I'm actually going to transfer all of this stuff over onto this cartridge here. So there's going to be some very fiddly little soldering to do to move those over. But yeah, this Hamtaro cartridge doesn't deserve to completely die, I suppose. I was just going to chuck it in the bin, but that does feel quite bad. So it's very rare that I get to use my hot air station, but we're going to need it for removing the chips. And of course, I'm going to be using my little extractor as well. So I'm going to start by applying some flux to the pins on the chip. This is just going to help everything sort of melt consistently and together while I'm blowing some hot air onto it, and then eventually I can lift it up. I completely forgot about the sheer heat blowing out of the end of the hot air station, so I managed to melt my mat. After getting one that was much more heat resistant, I could then lift up the pins on the other side. Now please forgive my shoddy camera angle here. I do make sure to capture the next chip removal a lot better. So after that, we can lift up the chip, and then we can turn our attention to the other cartridge. Now this is the Pokémon one, and one thing I actually noticed was that there seems to be some trace repairs or some damage on the actual board. And this reminded me, I've not even actually tested to see if this game works. So I wonder if someone's actually had to do some repairs here to get this game working again properly. So I'm going to plug it into my totally normal standard Game Boy Advance SP, and we can check to see if the game actually works. Twice. Hooray. So let's go ahead and remove the chip. So again, I'm going to apply some flux just to help everything lift off easier. And then I can go at it with my hot air station. Now, I don't really do hot air station work very often, so I'm not sure if I'm doing this right or if my temperature is too low. I had it at about 300 degrees. So I don't know if it needs to be higher. I'd love to know. But I'm now going to try on the other side. So for the rest of the work, I'm going to be using my soldering iron. I recently got a new one, and I thought this would be a really fun way to play with it a bit, since I've not actually used it yet. I've got to say a big thank you to iFixit for sending this to me for free. This video is not sponsored by anybody, but I'm really grateful that they send me their latest tools. It's very cool. So let's go ahead and start by removing the battery on the Hamtaro cartridge. So let's go ahead and clean the motherboard. We don't want to be setting anything new down onto some old sticky flux. Now, these chips need to go back in a specific orientation, which is labeled on the board by a gold arrow and on the chip by a small black circle. So make sure that you're putting it the right way up, otherwise it won't work. You can see the arrow is just there below the battery. So it's time to tin up the pads, and we can get to work reseating this chip. So once they're nice and tinned, again, I cleaned off all of the flux, and then I cleaned up the chip that we're going to be sitting back down again. You've got to make sure that everything's nice and clean here, because otherwise the flux can actually cause corrosion long term. Now, most good electronic repair people would just use the hot air station again and heat everything up at the same time, and the chip will just sort of push into place. But I'm instead going to be soldering each leg by hand. So I started by soldering down a leg on either side just to hold it in place, and then I got to work individually soldering each leg. Now, if you do this and you mess up and you connect two legs, don't worry, because at the end we can just go over with some flux and some fresh solder, and that'll set everything straight. As you can see on this side, I made a right mess. I'm sure there are many people wincing at this, but as I said, some flux will take care of this and just make everything look beautiful. So, once it's all cleaned up with some isopropyl alcohol, it's looking much, much better. And I'm really pleased with how this all turned out. So now we can get to work on the rest of the board. Now, I asked my friend Sean, who's an absolute tech whiz, what would happen if I left this crystal and these little resistors, or whatever they are, on the board, which won't actually be using them. And he said nothing, because that all comes from the chip and it just simply won't use it. But obviously, since we're transplanting everything over to the Hamtaro cartridge and vice versa, I'm going to be moving everything over just for the sake of it, which is fairly straightforward to do in principle, but in actual practice, it was really hard. This crystal was pretty easy, but then the tiny little surface mount chips were a nightmare. Now, seriously, I should have just used the hot air station for this. It would have just blown the solder equally, and I could have just lifted it off with a pair of tweezers. I, for some reason, just didn't. Hindsight's a brilliant thing. I should have just done that. Don't know why, but watch me struggle with a soldering iron and some tweezers. Once it was all cleaned up with some isopropyl alcohol, it doesn't look too bad. So I now need to fit the new battery onto the Hamtaro board, which now has the Pokémon chip on it, so that the Pokémon game we're building has a new battery on it. Boy, this is getting confusing. So the final thing for me to do is just clean up the areas which we've removed things from with some more flux and my soldering wick. It just wicks everything up. It does exactly what it says on the tin, and then it leaves it looking fancy and fresh. So there you go, all clean. However, there is one problem. I didn't realize this until I was editing, but that little component is not meant to be brown. There was never a single brown. There was only a single blue. So now there's a brown and a blue and a single brown, when there should be two browns and a single blue. So this is Elliot in the future with the hindsight. So I'm going to attempt to use the hot air station, and by golly, let me tell you, I suck at the hot air station. Firstly, it's terrifying. One wrong move and your eyebrows are gone. And secondly, it just requires such a steady hand. So once I'd removed the blue thing, I could then remove the brown one. That one thankfully came off a bit easier. I then tinned up the board and came in with the blue thingamajig and attempted to hot air station that bad boy in place, which, as you can see, went really well. Whatever. Let's just get the brown one in place with a soldering iron. The rest of this footage is obviously back in the past before I noticed this, so you'll still see the mismatched components. I hope you understand what I'm talking about. I'm not sure I do anymore though, I've breathed in so much flux. Let's just set the Hamtaro chip down onto the old Pokémon dog chewed board. And once everything's been cleaned again with a toothbrush and some isopropyl alcohol, everything looks absolutely beautiful. So it is done. The Pokémon chip is now on the Hamtaro board, and the Hamtaro chip is now on the chewed up little Pokémon board, and I've swapped over the components up here. So hopefully these are both going to work. So let's very quickly pop the Hamtaro game back together. So that's a fairly simple thing to do. Just pop the shell on, slide it down, grab the little screw, and we can pop that back in there, and we'll give that a test in just a second. Now, as for the Pokemon cartridge, I'm not going to be reusing this shell. It's all chewed up and it just looks really nasty, and since I've just done all of the work making this all nice, and this is in fact going to be my personal copy of Pokemon Blue, I want to do something a little bit better than this. I did manage to find a replacement blue shell. This is an aftermarket one, and then I thought to myself, wait a minute, we're going to be making this aftermarket now. I don't want to just make it look like it's supposed to be legit. I'm going to go all out and make it look super crazy. I know a guy. Now it's time to watch a true professional work. Matthew has been custom molding shells and buttons and cases for such a long time, and he's an absolute wizard at it. He's also just such a great friend and always helps me with whatever I need. He seriously is a real one, and I'm so grateful. Matthew, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much, man. And check out Lab 15, everyone. The link will be in the description. Enjoy Matthew working. Here it is, my custom-made translucent shell by my friend Matthew over at Lab 15. What an absolute legend, and what a seriously cool shell. This is going to look so sweet. So here we go. Let's pop it into its new home, set it down, and then we can take the front and slide it on. I am so excited. This looks so damn good. Look at that. Perfectly translucent, just enough to see all of the epic stuff going on inside. So now we can pop the screw into the back. In fact, I'm using the one that Matthew sent me. Let's use the original one from the Pokemon cartridge. Boom. That is locked in. Look at that. So, to finish off, what are we going to do with the sticker? Well, I could try and get this off. I don't think it would go very well, and we're making this custom after all. Well, I managed to find a custom Pokemon Blue sticker on eBay, and I'll leave the link to this as well. I don't know who makes this. It just seemed to be a private seller on eBay, but look at that. It's a shiny, hollow, if you will, Blastoise Pokemon sticker, and that is going to be absolutely perfect on there. And again, this is not going to be a legit shell, and I didn't want to just use an aftermarket blue one. I thought, let's go all out, and here it is, a custom sticker. So let's go ahead and set this down onto the shell. Here we go. Let's hope it's aligned. Yes, that is pretty good. These were never absolutely centered to begin with. There we have it. Look at that. My very own custom Pokemon Blue cartridge. That looks so damn sweet. I can't believe it. However, does it work? That's the final thing to find out, because we've done quite a bit of stuff to it now. So let's chuck it into my analog pocket and let's turn it on and see if it works. Look at that. This is sweet. I have my very own custom Pokemon Blue cartridge. That is so cool. From a dog-chewed shell to this. That is just so epic. New game. I'm not going to go through this now because it takes hours, but there we have it. That is just so cool. I'm so chuffed with that, it's unreal. The final thing I suppose we need to do is check to see if the Hamtaro cartridge works, because obviously we did fiddle around with that as well. So let's chuck that into the analog pocket and let's see what happens here. Error. Uh-oh, that's not a good start. I wonder if it's because of that broken pin. Let's try it in the dual screen SP and see if it works. Oh. Well, that doesn't work. Annoying. I think I have just spotted the problem. That leg right there isn't actually connected. So I'm going to get my soldering iron out again and fix that. Well, let's see. Let's see. Is that the problem and has that solved it? Let's plug it in again and see. There we go. That has got it working. Thank you very much, Hamtaro. You now work. I will put you in a box and it'll probably stay there forever. So there we have it. That is it now working. So both of these cartridges are working like nothing ever happened, but this one looks extremely beautiful and I am just so pleased with it. Thank you very much for watching this video. It's been so fun. I've really enjoyed this. I'll catch you all in the next one. Goodbye.